Hello again, it's Noob, and what we have here is a residential 5-lever mortice lever lock. It is not curtained, which means that the key acts directly on the bolt via the talon to open it up. This is the third video in my 5-part beginner's guide to lever lock picking series, and in the previous video we looked at lever padlocks, which are a by and large simpler cousin of these residential mortice lever locks. Part 1, of course, we looked at all the different types of lever locks which are available, how they work, and all the terminology, naming conventions and the such like. So please do go check out parts 1 and 2 if you're interested. So this is a 5-lever lever lock. You can see here that we have 5 levers in the lever pack. We have the bolt assembly with the talon, this V notch here. And of course, like all lever locks, what we're trying to do is get the bolt stump through the gating to the other side to get an open. If I throw the key in the back, we saw this in part 1, but we'll do it again. You have part of the key at the back, which is going to engage with the talon, so that's the bolt step, and all the other steps on the key are there to lift the levers to the right height so that that bolt stump can pass through the gating. So how are we going to learn to pick these? Well, you might be thinking, like the lever padlocks, maybe we could have a tensioning device a bit like this, which will go into the keyway and tension the bolt at the back. And actually, in theory, that could work. However, I wouldn't really suggest it for these types of locks, purely because there are a huge variation in the positions of the bolt within the lever pack, the relative key heights and gauges and all those kind of things. So to keep this video simple, we're going to look at really 2 different techniques to opening these locks. The first method is probably the oldest, the age-old method of just using wires. And at the top we have the tensioning wire, which is usually a bit thicker, somewhere between 2 and 2.5 millimeters. This 2.5 millimeters is about right. And this is made of music wire. And then you need a lever pick, and this is a beautiful pick wire, which is custom made by Andy Mac locksmith tools, and this is used for lifting the levers. Now, if you don't have the money to get commercially available tools like this, and there are many places you can get lever wires made for you, you can just purchase music wire in lengths just like this and make your own lever picks. This is essentially just a right angle bend, filed down smooth, and then a little triangle here for turning. Very much the same as this tensioner here, which is just a thicker piece of metal, pretty much done the same. And that's as simple as it can be. This will work. However, like most things, if you're willing to spend a little bit more money on it, you get a much, much, much better tool. The second technique we're going to look at, and again, these were provided on loan by Andy Mac, are 2-in-1s and non-curtained residential lever locks. They can be picked using either 5 or 7 gauge 2-in-1 picks, depending on the lock. At the end of the video, we'll also explore what we do when we come across non-curtained mortice lever locks like this, which have false notches. So you can see here the gating, and there the false notch. So we have our lock in the vise, and the first thing to look at is how to make a tensioning wire. Some music wire somewhere around 2 millimeters to 2.5 millimeters is usually all right for these types of locks, although there may be a bit of trial and error in getting one to work for you. That's why I suggest getting some music wire in various lengths and diameters and just trialing it out until you get a bit of a feel for it. The best thing to do, and I've got some 2.5mm wire here, is to cut it, once you've got a right angle in it, roughly twice the height of the keyway, and then to use snips and files to just file this back and put a little bit of a rounded edge on so it doesn't damage the inside of your lock or catch. You want it so that you can feel, you can see here, I'm pulling that bolt back and forth by interacting with the talon. And that's what you want to be able to hear and listen for and feel for. You should be able to feel this. If you don't feel that and you feel springiness, it's possible what you're doing is you're moving a lever up and down, and that's not really what you want. So you want to get this so that it will slide in comfortably into the lock and interact with the bolt talon. In terms of the actual pick tips itself, so if you look at the key, you really want to find something which is about the same height as the bitting. There you go, you can see, and all the way down to halfway down the center of that key. So if you line that up with the keyway, you'll see that it's centered in the keyhole all the way down to the bottom of the lock, and that's about right. And of course you can do something like this with a bit of bent music wire. So here's a before and after, just a right angle with a triangle for gripping onto at the end. Or indeed, as I said, you could get yourself something nice and a bit smoother and a bit nicer all the way around, like this commercially made one. So let's have a go at picking this then. The first thing to do is put tension on. I'm going to put some autofocus on here for you so you can focus on the actual levers themselves. And I'm just going to make sure I've got a good grip on that bolt talon. You see the bolt sliding back and forth as I tested that. Then I'm going to put a finger here to support the wire as it goes in, just like that. And this will allow me to put some good tension on the lock and just try to find levers which are binding and lift them up. So anything that feels like it's binding, I'm just lifting a little bit, not all the way, just a little bit at a time. So it's what we call sort of walking those levers, just pushing up a little bit if they feel like they're binding. It's going from lever to lever, so that's lever 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, back to the front. Anything that's binding, just nudge it up. That's 5, trying to get onto 4. 4, come on, 4. 4, 3, 2, 1. And you know, I will take your time on this. For these locks, sometimes it's not difficult, especially if they don't have any false gates, but they can just take their own time in terms of getting that open. Got plenty of tension on, so I'm binding up against those levers in the pack. And we got it. So just walking through that lever pack with lots of tension on, lifting all those levers until finally we lifted them all to the right height and that bolt talon can slide through the gating. Of course, with levers, locks like this, you can tension again the other way around. So what you're doing is tensioning counterclockwise now, and then you can go back through the lever pack and pick it to, I guess, close. There we go. A little bit easier because a lot of the time these locks are designed to stop you from opening the bolt and not closing it back up again. So in front of you, you can see two custom-made 2-in-1 picks for those mortice lever locks. They must be non-curtained. In the next video, we'll look at curtained lever locks and you'll see why these won't work. These do come in different gauges, the most common of which are gauge 7 and gauge 5. And that's because the keys for most common mortice lever locks like that come in 7 and 5 gauge as well. So you need to choose the right tool for the right keyway. You can get these types of picks from a number of different locksmith suppliers as well. So how do these 2-in-1 picks work? Well, just like the lever padlock 2-in-1 picks, we have two different tips. We have, if this was a key, the bolt step, and we have a picking tip. So this would provide the tension, this would lift the levers. So to turn the tensioning tip, of course, I'm just going to turn a dial at the other end. And the same with the picking tip. I've chosen a 7 gauge 2-in-1 tool because that fits very well in this lock, as you can see. So the first thing we would do is that we would put the tool in and we would get the tensioning tip, which you can see there, to just engage with the bolt talon itself. And I can just feel it engaging. You can see me manipulating that bolt back and forth. Then I would use, you can see me just manipulate that thumb turn here to lift the wire, the levers up one at a time. And that's exactly what I'll do. I'll just go through the pack and I would lift anything that's binding. It's a lot easier to control than just using wires, although a lot more expensive. And again, unless you want to make your tools yourself and have the skills to do that. So there we go. And of course, like forever, you can move it back or pick it backwards with these tools as well. Very, very useful. Now, just as we get really comfortable with the notion of picking standard mortice lever locks, then we come across variants which have false notches in. So you can see the first lever here. You can't really see the rest of the lever pack. We can see a few, the 3 levers there. So they're only a 3 lever lock. And that's because we have these spacers. So these levers are cheap and they're not shaped or pressed so that they have spacing automatically inbuilt in the levers themselves. So they have these little spacers which act like washers between each lever to provide spacing for the key to interact and for the levers to move freely. If I put the key in the lock, you'll see that I am lifting all of the levers to the correct height, and that will allow the bolt stump to slide through the gating of those levers and the lock will open. If, however, you're picking it and you only pick the levers to that height and they line up with the false notch, that bolt stump will engage with that false notch and lock the levers in place, essentially preventing you from picking it any further. Not good. So we have to develop other techniques to be able to get ourselves out of these false gates, or at least pick past them. So I have a lever wire here, and I'm just going to pick one of these levers up. And what I want you to just be aware of is that there's a few techniques in which you can develop to get yourself past these false notches. So if you find that your bolt stump engages with one of these false notches, then first of all you have to release the tension and allow the levers to essentially fall back like that. And you may have to start again. Now, if you know you fall into a false notch, and you know that because you can't pick past it, no matter how you pick it, the levers, you will not get an open. If you know when you fall into a false notch, so you get a small movement on the bolt and then the whole lock stops, is that you can try a few techniques. The first one is when you're picking, just vary your tension when you know that you're on the lever which falls into that false notch, and then you might be able to skip past it a bit like you would a serration on a key pin in a pin tumbler lock. The other way is to try to pick the whole lever a little bit higher than, so when you know it's turned to bind, let go of the tension, then try to push it up as high as you can, and then let it fall back down and hopefully hit the gate on its journey down. And that's really all you can try to do, is to either try to lighten up your tension to try to make sure that you treat the false notch a bit like a serrated pin. You can see that this is just clicking now, a bit like serration, but that doesn't work all the time. Or you try to make a mental map of where you are picking it, and when you know you're going to fall into a false notch, lift it a bit higher so you get beyond the false notch, and then maybe come back to that lever later to push it a little bit higher to its correct position. So those are the two main techniques which I know of, although I'm sure there are plenty others to explore too. Sometimes it's just trial and error, and I would suggest making locks with small cutaways like this when you're practicing so you can see what's actually going on inside. So let's just see if we can't get past that false notch here on lever 1. I've made that mental order that the levers bind in 3, 2, then 1 to the front. Get lots of good tension on there like this. So set lever 3 first and try to get 1 and 2, just walk them up. Oh, too far. Okay, you can try again, but on lever 1 to move it past there, and then lever 2, move it up a little bit more, then get back onto lever 1. There we go. Oh, don't lose it, bit more tension. Just walk those levers up. And we got it into the gate. Phew, quite hard. So what you saw there, of course, is me knowing the binding order, knowing when I should fall into that false gate, and then correcting it so that I can just push that lever past it onto a different part of the lever assembly or the gating, and then just walk levers 2 and 1 up and up and up until we finally get an open. Tough work, but that does make these levers with their false gates more entertaining to pick and to learn, albeit a little frustrating. And again, I would recommend when you're learning to make some of these cutout locks so you can see what's going on inside. So there we go. That was how to pick non-curtained mortice lever locks, including how to pick out of these false gates, or at least some of the techniques to do so. And in the next video, we will be looking, of course, at the curtained lever locks, where the curtain actually engages with the bolt, not the actual key itself. I'll see you next time.